We express a cordial greeting from International Gnostic Science and Culture to you who accompany us in the fourth topic of this self-knowledge course. My name is Ingrid Olaya, and the topic we will discuss is called The Transformation of Impressions. To start, we must be clear about what is transformation. Transformation means change, modification, or alteration of one thing into another. In this way, we can understand that our life is in constant transformation, both biologically and psychologically. We can observe the transformation in nature, such as in a plant, which through various processes produces its color, its smells, its aroma, its flowers. Also in water, as it evaporates, it condenses, and clouds are created. Like an egg, it develops and transforms into a living being, like a chick or a turtle. Just as transformation is evidential in nature, we too can transform our lives. It is not a secret that we are surrounded by complicated situations, problems, difficulties that we would like to solve, but we have not yet found the right way to do it because we don't know ourselves. And that is precisely the objective of this self-knowledge course, to learn to know ourselves. Because we want others to change, when in fact, it's each one of us that must generate these changes or transformations. Remember that the outside is the reflection of the inside. It's important that we keep in mind that this is seen in the difficulties or situations that are presented to us. They are necessary to know ourselves and discover ourselves. We are all participating in this course because we wish to transform ourselves. We want our life to be different, for there to be harmony, peace, happiness, and well-being. But how can we achieve this? Simply through the practices that we have already studied in this course, such as observer and observed, self-observation, and meditation. These practices help us to discover ourselves. That is why it is necessary to implement them in our lives daily, to begin to notice those changes that we need. The Venerable Master Samael tells us that man is what his life is. It's worth asking ourselves, what is our life? Precisely, our life is a result of different transformations. In our physical body, we observe these transformations through what we eat, what we breathe, and our impressions. But let us be clear. What are impressions? Impressions are everything that we perceive through our five senses and that reach our mind. For example, if we see a chair, the chair can't enter inside us. What enters through our sight and remains in our mind is the impression. When we see a tree, we recognize it. We can't put it inside ourselves. What enters is the image we have of it. In the same way, it happens with people, objects, sounds, smells, and colors, which we perceive through our senses. It's important that we keep in mind that impressions enter our mind directly. Gnosis observes man as a three-story factory. The first floor, or base, is food. The second floor is air. And the third floor are the impressions, and they are named hierarchically according to their vital need. We will start with the first food, that is the physical food, such as vegetables, fruits, legumes, meats, dairy products, cereals, grains, among others. We might ask ourselves, how long can we live without food? There have been cases of people who have lasted a month or more without consuming any food. If we look at everything on our plate at lunchtime, we know that these foods must go through a process of assimilation, digestion, and transformation. For this reason, it's important to have proper chewing and insalivations, and thus we will have a better process of absorption of nutrients. It is also important to consume food in an emotionally conducive and suitable environment, because this is part of the nutrition, even if we do not believe it. But before the food is on our plate, it's worth knowing the quality of what we are eating. For a moment, let us reflect about the food of our ancestors. In those years where there was no industrialization, where agriculture was free of herbicides, pesticides, insecticides, fungicides, toxins that are now currently being brought to our tables. Today, the damage caused by glyphosate and many chemical cocktails that are applied to monocultures are already public, which have killed native species and even traditional foods. What can we say about popular transgenics? Those of which in many European countries are not accepted due to long-term damage. That is why we must reflect on the fact that life feeds life. And this is seen in foods that are produced naturally and that are called organic, mostly produced or harvested by our farmers. Therefore, they dedicate more time and care to their crops, and they have not been subjected to genetic manipulation in laboratories. Therefore, physical food must be of the best quality. It would even be worthwhile to look for organic food distribution, or even those who can and have the possibility of growing their own food, as many of our grandparents did, for example. There are practical ways to make very simple home gardens, which would be a very good option. First, to raise awareness and get closer to life, and on the other hand, to consume healthy food. Today, canned foods, soft drinks, preservatives, colorings, and chemical additives, among others, have become the cause of many illnesses. There are even products that have been taken off the market due to the damage it causes to our health. Hippocrates, a doctor of ancient Greece, teaches us a wonderful postulate. Let food be your medicine, and medicine be your food. In relation to our second food, air, if we reflect for a moment on this vital element found in nature, we could ask ourselves, how long can we live without breathing? Some may last for a few seconds and even minutes. In this way, we realize that air is more important than the food that we bring to our table or physical food that we talked about a moment ago. But why is air so important? Because one of its compounds is oxygen, which is necessary to maintain life, since the cells of our body without oxygen die quickly. For this reason, through respiration, oxygen passes into our bloodstream, reaching all of the organs of our body and even our brain. If more than 4 minutes pass without any oxygen, it begins to fail. And if it continues without that supply, death can occur. Hence the importance of learning how to breathe. When we breathe in a resting state, we take in approximately 500 milliliters of air. But if we breathe deeply, we could reach our total lung capacity, which is the maximum volume to which the lungs can expand with a maximum possible effort. Therefore, when we do an intense exercise for a long time, we notice the agitation and lack of air and energy, showing us the importance that air has for us. Let's remember how babies breathe, who, when inhaling, fill their stomach. When you have the opportunity, observe their breathing, and then let us become aware of our own breathing. When we take deep breaths, the amount of oxygen our body assimilates is greater, and even this leads to relaxing our body and preparing us for practices such as meditation. Before we do these types of practices, it is beneficial to practice deep breathing, inhaling the air through the nose slowly as we can. And once we have inhaled completely, we are going to retain it for as long as possible. And then exhale short and fast. And when we exhale, we will realize how our body tends to a natural relaxation, which will even allow us to counteract stress and improve our circulation. That is why this food, the air, is what the people of the Orient call prana, which is the vital energy found in all nature. We invite you to do breathing exercises daily, which consist of taking deep breaths 30 times in the morning and at night. This will help you maintain a healthy life. Regarding the third food, the impressions, as we have already said, is everything that we perceive through our five senses and that reaches our mind. Although our body has a specific system to digest the two previous foods, we digest food through our digestive system and air through our respiratory system, but we do not have a specific system or organ to digest or transform impressions. These impressions are even more important than the previous foods, since without them we could not live, not even for a second. They constitute life itself. Since if the air didn't impress on our lungs and our blood, we could not live. If food didn't impress on our stomach and intestinal tracts, we could not live either. Impressions are essential. All that we live and that comes to our mind are impressions. All events, joy, sadness, hope, despair, problems, worries, and other things come to our mind in the form of impressions. All circumstances or events, no matter how small, whatever it seems, it comes to our mind in the form of impressions. Thus, impressions need to be transformed, since over time, these untransformed impressions give rise to our fears, mistakes, anger, greed, envy, and so on. Ourselves, or psychological I, are untransformed impressions. For example, when we were children, many of these selves had not developed. If the child receives yelling, insults, scorn, offenses, or mistreatments, these impressions produce fear, fright, and even crying in the child. But as these impressions accumulate and store in our mind, they produce reactions, which are not only repeated by imitation, but are expressed for those untransformed impressions, and which give origin to fears, resentments, anger, greed, lust, and so on. And this is precisely how we have developed our selves in this life, since the selves are untransformed impressions. Every impression that comes to our mind produces a reaction. Then we find that it is not only the impressions, but also the untransformed impressions that affect our life, as well as the reactions that they produce. For example, if we throw a ball at the wall, the ball is the impression, and the bounce is the reaction. Another example would be if we throw a stone into a lake, the stone is the impression, and the waves are the reaction. Normally, impressions come to the mind, and it then reacts against the impact of the outside world. That is, if they insult us, we insult. If they offend us, we offend. If they yell at us, we yell, and so on. Therefore, to transform impressions, just as the lungs transform air or our digestive system transforms what we eat, our consciousness can transform the impressions. We must interpose between the impression and the mind, which is the consciousness. That is to say, that the consciousness assimilates everything that comes from the external world like impressions, so that it is the one who receives it, and not the mind, since consciousness is capable of digesting them. This can be achieved through self-remembering, which is simply never forgetting ourselves, our own being. It is to be alert, alert perception, alert novelty, before the impressions that we receive from our senses. Now we're going to explain the practice, which is self-remembering. It consists of being aware of ourselves, not forgetting ourselves, that is, integrating with our consciousness, being aware of our body, our senses, our own way of speaking, laughing, walking. To be aware of what we are doing at this moment is to feel and realize this precise moment. When we forget ourselves and consciousness is not present, impressions enter the mind directly in a mechanical way. Consciousness is activated when we are in self-remembering, a state that is produced in us that allows us to be aware and not react as we commonly do to events and circumstances of life. We cannot transform all impressions, but we can begin to transform those impressions of which we are becoming aware. For example, an insult, something offensive, a look, a word, or the reactions of those around us. The circumstances or events of our daily life which often make us all lose our calm. If we analyze and explain a Gnostic postulate that teaches us that the words of an insulter have no more value than those given by the insulted person. If someone says something unpleasant to us, that is an impression. I can give importance or value to those words and react impulsively with more words of offense. Or if I am attentive and self-remembering, in that state where the conscience is expressed naturally and do not pay importance to those words, they are, through consciousness, transformed into higher forces, into harmony, into conscientious principles. This reminds us of the story of Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama. He relates that on one occasion, a person insulted him, and one of his disciples, who was observing this, complained to the Buddha, asking why he allowed himself to be treated like this. To which he replied, "If I give you a horse, but you do not accept it, whose gift is it?" The disciple said to him, "Of the one who offered it." The Buddha clarified, "Insults are like gifts. If you receive them, you accept it. If you do not receive it, whoever insults you stays with it." This reflection is obviously made by a man with an awakened consciousness, but this is what we must achieve by not reacting to the different events that life presents to us. This is a clear example of what it means to transform impressions.